We have Scott Douglas, who's from the University of British Columbia, here with us tonight, and he's going to be talking about creating and disseminating knowledge, the role of regional open access journals in the field of TESOL. Uh, what he's going to be talking about is using the BC TEAL Journal as an example, and his presentation is going to look at the role TESOL affiliate journals have in the creation and dissemination of knowledge in the field. As a journal editor, he's going to share BC TEAL's story from the starting point all the way up to sustaining it as a scholarly, peer-reviewed regional journal, with particular considerations related to open access, Creative Commons licensing, and indexing. As an editor, he's also going to describe the supportive submission process and the publication process, all the way from start to finish, along with all the benefits that are involved for everyone. Finally, he's going to share some examples of new knowledge and findings published in the journal that might not have seen the light of day if not for this nurturing outlet for scholar practitioners in British Columbia. Scott Roy Douglas is an associate professor in the University of British Columbia's Okanagan School of Education. His focus is on English as an additional language teaching and learning, and he is also the editor of the BC TEAL Journal. Please welcome Scott Douglas. Over to you.
Hello, everybody. So thank you, Jim. Oh my gosh, is that what I said I would do? And so, well, I know it's been already like an hour and a half that folks have been in sessions. And so feel free to take a little bio break or something if you want right now for 2 minutes while we get the slides up and things like that. Grab a glass of water. This is your chance. The first few minutes, we're going to do some fun activities, but it's okay if you miss them. So now's your chance to take a break. So Jim, thanks very much. Gosh, yeah, as I said, I can't believe I said I would do all that, but let me just see if I can get up my slides. Does everybody see a picture of my beautiful campus there? Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and so as Jim said, I'm gonna talk about one of the, I don't know, the great passions of my life, the BC TEAL Journal, BC TEAL itself. Gosh, you know, I always think back to my parents, and years ago when I was a little kid, my parents would be sitting around the kitchen table and they'd have like those bottles of rubber cement. Do you remember that, before computers? And they'd be cutting out clip art and they would be like making newsletters for like the Lions Club or the Historical Society or things like that. And they were always, so I guess I learned this at a young age to get involved in these kinds of things. But it's just, yeah, and so that's sort of where I've come from. So I'm very appreciative for my parents for sort of, I don't know, bringing me up in this way that I get involved in these organizations. So like I said, my dad was in the Lions Club. For me, BC TEAL is my Lions Club or my Elks Club. You know, some people are in the Rotary. Yeah, I'm in my local teachers association. So as I said, that's my beautiful campus there. I'm in British Columbia. There's a picture of the valley where I live. And so I'm in the center of, lower center of British Columbia. We have a beautiful lake where I am, where some people call us the Hawaii of Canada. We have flowers and all kinds of things just about all year around. We are located, there's another map right there so you can see where I am. So I am on, so I just wanted to say to everybody as well, white, chas chalachalt, and white puchiap, you've all arrived and everything is possibility. And that was taught to me by my friend, Bill Cohen, who's a member of the Syilx Okanagan First Nation Band. And he's been teaching me in Syilxchin, which is the local language here in the Okanagan Valley. So there you go. So you have a bit of sense where I am. It's 5:30 where I am in the afternoon, and apologies if I'm incoherent. I've been teaching all day, and I've been on Zoom for about 9 hours, I think, so far. And for some reason, I've signed up for another hour and a half. All right. So or an hour. So what are we going to talk about today? I think our big question for today is how do open access journals support the creation and dissemination of knowledge in our field? And I'm specifically thinking of like TESOL affiliate journals, so, or like little journals that exist for your own teaching association. So I don't mean the big fancy national ones. I'm thinking more that's in your state or your province or your prefecture. And why don't you just take a chance and type something in the chat, like what are the benefits of having local journals? So feel free to type in the chat, and I will try and follow everyone as I look in here. Zoom.
I can help.
So someone said you're sounding good, Scott. Well, thank you very much. Yeah. So providing more accessible publication opportunities for members. That's brilliant. Yeah. Open. Yeah. Someone mentions the TESOL Journal. I'm going to talk about them maybe a bit too, but it's just an awesome local journal. Contextual content, right? Like it's connected to your local context and your local settings. Yeah, nice TESOL, another wonderful one. Opportunities for members to share their experience, right? People who might not find a voice elsewhere. It gives them a chance to have a voice. I'm sure, and open to non-members. Well, there you go. So lots of good ideas. But before we go any further with those ideas though, oh, someone just mentioned mentoring. I'm wondering what brought you here today. So I'm gonna put a link into the chat. I'm going to stick, and what I've done is I've made a little Jamboard. So I'm just going to stick that link in the chat. If folks could click on that link, that's going to take you to a Jamboard. And you're like, what's a Jamboard? I will show you in a minute. Don't panic. So if you go to that link there, and you don't have to if you don't want to, but what we're going to do, if I can find my, there it is, boom. There we go. Yeah, good, excellent. People are joining. I've got anonymous elephants in here. So you can see what I've done. Can everybody see my Jamboard? Is that what I'm sharing with you right now? Awesome. Yeah, open access journals are great. Thank you very much. So put in your questions, like what brought you here today? So, and the way I can see people are doing that, you can click on a sticky note and you can create a sticky note and you can ask your question like, how do you recruit volunteers? I spelled recruit wrong. Volunteers. Yeah, that's a good question. And so let's see how many questions we can get here. How do you attract authors? That's an awesome question. Yeah. What's the biggest challenge in setting them up? That's another really amazing question. What are the do's and don'ts of open access journals? Awesome, awesome. Are open access journals accessible? Really good question. What are your standards? Love these questions. What questions do you have about, oh no, I wrote that one. What questions do you have about open access? What are the rights of authors after they've been published? Are publications in open access journals peer reviewed? Good one. Some of you have noticed I'm starting to fight with you as I'm moving them around. Apologies if I'm stealing your stickies. Yeah, let's do a couple more questions from the peanut gallery out there. How do we access and is it user friendly? That's really good. What are the best practices for increasing visibility and reputability of your open access journal? Oh, I love all of these questions. These are really great. Well, guess what? I'm not going to answer any of them right now. Dun, dun, dun. But I'm hoping that during the next sort of 40 minutes or so, how do authors get published? What's the process like? Brilliant. I'm hoping that I'm going to answer some of these questions. We'll have some time at the end of my presentation to visit these questions again. And any of that we haven't answered, we can maybe grapple with them a bit. But what I thought we would do is that these are good. As I'm talking, keep your brains turned on and see if I actually answer any of your questions. So let's go back to my actual presentation. So how will we answer today's big question? So does everybody now see my slides again? Yeah, awesome. So how are we going to answer our big question of how do open access journals support the creation and dissemination of knowledge, especially regional ones? We're going to answer that question by answering a whole bunch of little questions. So don't worry. I broke the cardinal rule of not using tiny font on your slides, but those are the questions that we're going to be trying to answer over. And I can see that some of my questions are the same as your questions on the Jamboard, which is pretty super awesome. All right. So let's see. I'm going to start off though, but just telling you a bit about myself and where I am. So what is BC TEAL? BC TEAL is the Association of British Columbia Teachers of English as an Additional Language. We're one of North America's oldest English as an additional language teaching organizations. We started back before I was born, and I'm getting pretty old now. So We've been here for a long time, and it's really a home or a family for folks in the field of English as an additional language teaching and learning. Our mission is that it's really all about sharing expertise, right? And raising awareness of the profession. And you're going to see this is going to be a theme that's sort of throughout the entire affiliate weekend that we have, this idea of sharing. And also we're committed to leading and supporting excellence in ELT and in English. So what does that mean then? It means like we're trying to engage our members and challenge people's assumptions and what they think and gain knowledge and experience. And we thought to ourselves, well, if that's what we're doing, how do we do that? And one of the ways we do this is through our publications. And so BC TEAL, we have three major publications. We have our blog, we have our newsletter, and we have the journal. And what we're going to talk about today is the journal. And so I'll explain a bit of the difference between those later on. But really, this is going to be focused on British Columbia's scholarly publication, or BC TEAL's scholarly publication. So what is the BC TEAL Journal? It started in 2016, but I think the idea for it happened in around 2014. I was chatting with the president of BC TEAL at that time, Shauna Williams, and we'd had an event recently called Try TESOL, which was, it brings together all the TESOL organizations in the Pacific Northwest. So that's BC TEAL, Washington WASOL or Washington TESOL and TESOL. And we looked at our friends south of the border in the United States, and they were doing some awesome stuff with journals. And we thought, gosh, if they can do it, we can do it. And so we started looking in how could we do that? And so we started looking into what does it mean to have an open access journal that's peer reviewed, and especially not just peer reviewed, but double anonymous peer reviewed, where we sort of keep the identities of the authors and the peer reviewers confidential from each other. And we wanted to focus on British Columbia. And so now that was first started in 2016. We're now in our 6th year of publication. Our articles have been viewed over 37,000 times. And actually, we've published 33 articles, book reviews, and we have book reviews and editorials as well. But you know, this is the work of many, many volunteers, and I'm going to show you some of the names in a minute. But what is it they say? Many hands make light work, right? And so it's really a way for our membership to engage. We've got editors, copy editors, developmental editors, proofreading editors, peer reviewers, scholarly librarians. If I happen to see you somewhere, I'm going to ask you to volunteer, and I'll find a spot for you. And it's for everybody in BC TEAL, right? And so it doesn't matter what your teaching context is. It's for everyone. Also, though, special thanks goes out to folks in the library on my campus. I've even strong-armed librarians into helping out with the project as well. And so we've gotten scholarly librarians involved, et cetera, et cetera. We also have a journal advisory board, which is it's just folks from all around the province. They meet about once a year online, and they just sort of give guidance to the journal. But really, there's three main ways that people can be involved. They can, oh, good question. What would the librarians do? I'll answer that later. So how can people become involved? Well, we've got readers, we've got peer reviewers, and we've got authors. Those are some of the three major areas that we have where people can get involved. But before I explain those ways that folks get involved in BC TEAL, I thought I'd share some of the impetus for the BC TEAL Journal and how it all came about. So I told you about the conversations we had back in 2014, and also as we gazed across the border at what was going on in the United States and being impressed with some of the work doing there. This was also a dark time in my career. And so what do I mean by that? I was a new, I had just finished my PhD, and it was just a long, sad tale of rejection. And then somehow I managed to find this job where I am here. And I was doing research and sending out my articles to different journals, and oh my gosh, some people were mean when you look at the peer reviews, and they would give me 3 solid reasons why my papers should never see the light of day and why they should be rejected. And so I started chatting with other people, and I found that other people in British Columbia, they were saying, you know, we don't have access to journals. There's these expensive paywalls that are blocking access to journals. Even, no offense to our super organization, but even the TESOL Quarterly, if you don't have a subscription to it, or if you don't have access through your institution, you can't read those articles. A lot of these journals too, they have high rejection rates, and they advertise that like we only accept 12% of articles. So that means that there's for every 100 articles, there's like oh, I can't do the math, but there's tons and tons of people who are rejected. Yeah, harsh feedback again. Sometimes you get a peer reviewer who has a bad day, and occluded submission process as well. It just doesn't make sense. You look at these online websites for some of these journals, and you just have no idea where to begin. And then also there's the danger of predatory publishers. I was watching how folks were saying, hey, come and publish with us. It'll only take you 5 days. And then suddenly they have these publication charges, and it's like this scam. And so that was some of the barriers to local scholarship that I saw here in BC. And then we also saw a number of affordances that provided a fertile ground for a new journal, a supportive organization. So for example, BC TEAL, engaged membership. So our members are very active. We're well known for having members who are always wanting to do stuff and roll up their sleeves. Encouraging university partners. So there was that question about like, what would the librarians do? Well, the scholarly librarians were the folks with all the knowledge, right, about how copyright works, how indexing works, and also UBC offered to host our journal as well for free. And you'll find that many universities around the world are eager for folks to start journals and start them for free. Yeah, and also what I found also in British Columbia, there's a lot of active scholar practitioners. And so what I mean by that is that people are living in the hyphen. They're teachers, they're also students of learning. And so the very act of teaching itself is an act of knowledge creation, and that knowledge deserves to be shared, right? And then regional models. So what I mentioned before is like, we're looking at what other affiliates were doing, and people have already mentioned TESOL and things such as that. But we looked across the border and actually around the world. Osaka Jolt Journal would be another good example. MEX TESOL Journal, that's more of a national journal. But we saw that people were really doing some good work, and we thought, heck, if they can do it, so can we. Yeah, and it was kind of neat. We've also had support from friends around the world. So you can see Nice TESOL, MEX TESOL, MAT TESOL, and KTESOL are all there listed. There's a lot of really warm editors all around who are part of TESOL, who are willing to lend a hand and give advice. And so I've had some great advice from other TESOL affiliate journals. And so why have a journal, right? And so what is our philosophical stance? And I've mentioned this a little bit already. Like, we're more than just teachers and administrators or researchers, right? Like, all of us, we're constantly creating new knowledge. And when we share this knowledge, something happens magical where we become larger than our own selves. And this is how we grow, right? And also, I was thinking about like Pro-D. So that's what we call professional development here in British Columbia. I was thinking about how Pro-D sometimes seems to crush people down, right? It's like, oh God, I have to go to a workshop, or oh, my director's making me do this. So we wanted to think, well, what's some ways to do continuous professional development that lifts people up and makes them feel good rather than pushes them down? We want people to be energized at the end of the day when they're involved with BC TEAL's activities. And so part of that is this concept of our members being scholar practitioners, right? And so if you're a scholar practitioner, you're someone who invests in intellectual well-being. So really in the journal, we have a very holistic understanding of well-being. There's physical well-being, right? You need to eat and you need to sleep. There's social well-being, you need friends and you need to interact. there's mental well-being, but there's also, I think, intellectual well-being is an important part of who we are as teachers and scholars. And when we invest in our intellectual well-being and we engage in a larger conversation in the field, it makes us feel good, right? And it's part of who we are as humans, right? And I think the other thing that scholar practitioners do is that they seek continuous professional growth, right? This is something we want to do. Yeah, like why should people do PD? Well, sure, it might make them a better teacher, but you should just do it for the sake of doing it because it's something we do. It's part of our identity, and we enjoy it. If we don't enjoy it, we shouldn't do it, probably. Yeah. And what else are scholar practitioners? I think as well is that we avoid creating these divides between teaching and research. They're together, right? And we reconceptualize research and we reconceptualize teaching, and we realize that the folks at the chalk face, they have a lot of personal practical wisdom, and they know how to teach, right? So how do we capture that and share that? Another thing about a scholar practitioner is we give. The act of giving is uplifting, right? We contribute to the community's resources because we're going to get something back. No, maybe not. Maybe you'll get nothing back except for that feeling that you're part, you belong, right? You belong to the profession. And because we belong to the profession, if you're a scholar practitioner, you're trying to enhance the field and lift up the profession as a whole. So that when people ask me, Scott, what do you do? I can proudly say I'm an English as an additional language teacher, right? And it's nothing to be ashamed of. And so I think having all of that stance as a scholar practitioner and BC TEAL members as students of learning, that provides a justification for having a regional journal. The other major decision we made was that the journal had to be open access. That meant anybody could read it without charge. Anybody can submit without charge. There are no publication charges or anything like that. And the work itself can be used for any legal purpose, right? And so folks can read it, they can download it. Heck, they can wallpaper their walls with it if they want. But the idea is that they can share it, right? What's key though is the authors keep their copyright, and you have to attribute who wrote it, and they have to make attribution to BC TEAL as well. And so we're also not taking the author's intellectual property, right? The intellectual property belongs to the author, and they receive recognition. But it's not just about that. I think there's a higher moral imperative to open access. There's actually there's ethical considerations in that humanity as a whole benefits when we share, and people have the right to know what other people know. So if we're creating knowledge here in British Columbia, we don't want to build a wall around it. I think folks in Saskatchewan should know about it too, those poor Saskatchewan folks. And so, oops, is there any in the chat? And so, but you see what I'm saying though, is right, like this is bigger than just that. And so I saw previously you were talking about licenses and things like that. So one of the other things that we did is we decided on Creative Commons licensing. And if you go to the Creative Commons website, it'll walk you through. There's a few rest assured from Saskatchewan. They'll walk you through how to do these various licenses. Actually, it was interesting in the session before, I heard you talking about no derivatives and derivatives and things like that. So actually the BC TEAL Journal, and I'll show you in a minute, we went with, you have to provide attribution. It has to be for non-commercial purposes. So people can't gather the articles and sell them, for example. And there's no derivatives. You have to use them exactly as they are. Why? They're works of art. Wait till you see our articles. All right. And so, and what is a journal, right? And so I think this is the thing too. I mentioned we have blogs in journals, and we also have a newsletter. Typically in the journal, peer review is the foundation of the entire journal, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But what it is that your peers, your friends, or maybe your enemies, hopefully not, your colleagues in BC TEAL are reading this work, right? It's also longer articles as well. In a newsletter, you might be looking at an article about 750 words to 1,000 words, but in the BC TEAL Journal, the articles run from about 4,000 to 8,000 words, right? Also, the publication times are much longer with the journal. 6 months would be fast. Off a year from submission to publication is possible. I think 8 months is about what we have, and you'll see the process in a minute and why it takes so long. Also, the register is different a little bit, right? In our newsletter, it's reader friendly and a journalistic register, whereas in the BC TEAL, we have our own quirky sort of register that we're using. So there you go. So that's what the journal looks like, and I'll share the links at the end of the presentation. But so there it is. It's an electronic journal, and so it exists wholly within sort of the digital realm. The way it started, and I think I mentioned this, is that the very first thing that we did is that BC TEAL has always had a newsletter. But we reconceptualized the newsletter editor role, and we came up with this fancy title of TEAL Publications Chair. Yeah, and that's a board position at BC TEAL, and the TEAL Publications Chair oversees the different publications. So myself as the editor, I would report to the TEAL Publications Chair, and then that person is part of the board. What we had to do to get the journal off the ground is we had to pass a motion at the board of directors meeting. We have a budget of $0. And so our budget is $0 a year. So wait till you see what you can do with no money. And then also, so we immediately needed a partner and a friend. And perhaps we're lucky up here in Canada. But many universities are eager to help with these kinds of opportunities. So if you have people who work at a university in your teaching organizations, they could take a little trip down to the library and see if the library will help them with hosting. There's other organizations that do it differently as well. Then we created the Journal Advisory Board. We recruited peer reviewers, which basically meant anybody and everybody I ever met was asked to do this. We have some in the audience today who are our peer reviewers. We put out the call for submissions. And then it was like silence, you know, when you can like hear the birds in the background, there was nothing. And so we started to hit the pavement. We started going to all of our local conferences. I would sit in every single presentation and I would watch and I would try and think of what are 3 things really good about this presentation. And then I'd immediately go up afterwards and compliment the presenter on the 3 awesome things they did. By the time I'd wooed them with my flattery, they were going to submit an article to our journal, which was pretty cool. And so that's how we started our first steps. And so we're a regional journal. And so I can see some questions coming up, like, can we submit articles and things like that? The key thing, the first thing, it has to connect to British Columbia, because this is the BC TEAL Journal. If you're from Oregon, you should be putting your work in the TESOL Journal. And things like that. Now, having said that, we do publish articles from outside of BC, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the journal exists to promote scholarship related to teaching and learning here in BC. And our goal is to reflect the varying contexts of settings of our members and all levels of our members, regardless of where they work. So you could be from Saskatchewan and write an article, but the first thing I'm going to ask you is like, okay, so what do you know about BC? What can we do to make connections to British Columbia? And we're gonna, and you might have to do a lot of work to try and contextualize this in another setting, or not if you know about it. But if your paper fits with our focus and our scope, so it has to be related to teaching English as an additional language. That's the first thing. So if you send me an article about music, I'm gonna do what's called a desk rejection and say thank you very much, but this is an ELT journal. And then I actually do a control search just for the words British Columbia. And if BC isn't mentioned anywhere in your paper, I'll contact you and ask you why not, and whether. And I usually brainstorm other journals that you could submit to that might be more appropriate if I don't feel it fits with BC. But like I said, we even have Americans publish in our journal. I say that like being American is shocking. I'm sorry for everyone, but we even have Americans who've published in our journal before. But again, they had to work to contextualize it for British Columbia. So if it fits the focus and scope, it's sent out for double anonymous peer review. So that might be a new term for some folks who are outside of Canada. In other contexts, you use different names for that, but we wanted to go with non-ableist language. And that's why we came up with the terminology of double anonymous. But it just means that the author and reviewer identities are kept confidential from each other. And by calling it double anonymous, we feel that we're avoiding ableist language. Also, the peer reviewers, they know about teaching and learning in BC. And if I haven't done my job to help the author do some contextualizing to British Columbia, the very first piece of advice will be, you need to connect this to British Columbia. The reviewers themselves, they have up to 8 weeks to complete their reviews. So you can see now, this is why things take so long. But the peer review process could take up to 6 months, depending on how many rounds of peer review and things like that. Yeah, it was originally, I saw someone made a comment, originally our peer review was 4 to 6 weeks, but when the pandemic hit, we sort of stretched things out. And some of our super keeners, they'll send you a paper back right away. The peer review itself, it's a pretty streamlined process. We have a question and answer rubric that our peer reviewers use, and I'll show you that in a minute. But really at this point, like we're looking for big picture feedback, identification of any red flags and things like that, but we're not looking for nitty gritty, like, oh, there was a comma splice on page 9. If the paper is accepted, we can catch those comma splices later. It can take around 3 hours to do a review for folks. Some people take longer. But like I said, we're looking for big picture feedback because there's other stages involved in the peer review. And so why the heck would people even do peer review? Because I did see someone say it takes a long time and it can be exhausting and things like that. Well, what we found here in BC is these are some of the reasons people like to be a peer reviewer. It helps them, again, I was talking about intellectual well-being. It helps them take part in the wider intellectual life of the field. It gives you that chance to, you know, make yourself a little coffee and read through the paper. And for a brief moment, we too can be Northrop Frye, who's a Canadian scholar. Yeah, I'm trying to sound fancy. Anyway, I'll keep moving along. So the next reason folks become peer reviewers is it really helps them access the latest ideas and research. They're right at the cutting edge of ELT in British Columbia, and they're seeing things as it comes out. This happens to me all the time. I'll be reading through something as a peer reviewer and suddenly it sparks new ideas, or I get excited about new study areas that I wouldn't have thought about before. And it's just, it's so cool when I'm like, oh my gosh, I never thought about analyzing data that way. And it gets me going. It also helps me gain some, and it helps peer reviewers gain some critical understandings of scholarship, right? As we're being socialized into this kind of being a scholar practitioner and what it means to be a student of learning and to have this stance, we start to have a look at what other people's scholarship is, right? And then it helps us to think about, okay, well, what does it mean to be a scholar? You also get a familiarity with a range of research methods, right? So for example, believe it or not, I used to be a quantitative researcher. I used to do lots of regression analysis and correlations and vocabulary studies, and I'd give kids tests, and then I would like correlate that with their vocabulary. But as I started reading other work, I started getting into narrative inquiry and telling stories. And this is how we grow ourselves as transformative intellectuals, which is what we all are as teachers, right? It also helps me understand how a paper holds together. I don't know if you're like me, but I've spent many years teaching, don't tell some folks, but teaching 5-paragraph essays. And so I forgot a little bit about what it was like to read other kinds of things like this. And so I start to see how a paper holds together. And it's amazing over the years, because my literacy is still developing, right? And like, we're never done learning how to read or learning how to write. And so I'm starting to understand how papers hold together and things like that. It also helps me with constructive feedback and learning how to, again, we talked about lifting people up and not crushing them down. And so it helps our peer reviewers hone their abilities to give constructive feedback. One of the main philosophies of the BC TEAL Journal is we really don't look at rejecting you if you fit our focus and scope. So you know how some people might give you 3 reasons why your article should be rejected? We like to give you 3 ways you could strengthen your article to publication. And so when I talked about those long publication periods of up to a year or longer, that's because we'll help you with multiple drafts to strengthen that work to get it at the level that it can be published in a peer-reviewed journal. And British BC TEAL is so proud of our peer reviewers because it's helping to strengthen local scholarship and improve English language teaching here in our own backyard. And it's pretty exciting to think here we are, really we're on the edge of nowhere up here in BC, but look at what we're doing. And so what do the reviewers look for? They're looking for interest level, like is it interesting for our readers? And if it's not interesting, we'll give you some advice on how to strengthen it and how to make it more appealing to our viewers. Our viewers are looking to, again, contributions to British Columbia, right? And so it could be like a study that's a replication study that's done in BC for the first time. And again, though, if our peer reviewers feel you haven't made enough contributions to BC, we'll try and think of ways to help you strengthen that work to connect it to British Columbia. Knowledge as well is something important. Like, do you have current references? Does it look like you've read through the literature? So we'll go through and if we feel things might be missing, we can actually give you the full reference with the link. This is something that we specialize in. I don't know if some of you have had feedback before where they've said, oh, you need to add more A, B, and C, and there's no references, you don't know where to start. We'll give you some papers to read and help you out so that you can go along. We're looking, again, it's just because we're a mentorship journal doesn't mean we have low standards. What we do instead is that we're gonna work with you hand in hand to bring you up to those high standards. And so again, we're looking for suggestions to strengthen your work for publication so that we can help you get there. We're looking at your conclusions and your recommendations and your implications and things like that. One of the things we commonly look for are the 5 Ps. The 5 Ps is when you're getting into your implications sections, we're thinking, have you discussed implications for pedagogy? Have you discussed policy implications? Have you thought of any programming implications? What about professional development implications? How about provision of services? And so we'll help you if we see these holes and we're looking for things to add. APA formatting, but like I said, we won't get into the nitty-gritty of like correcting your commas and things like that. We're also a bit stuck in the Stone Age because we're using the 6th edition of APA. And we also do our own quirky Canadian things. If you look at some of our past published articles, you'll notice that we do wonky things with like with indentation and things like that, and also spelling conventions, et cetera, et cetera. I love it adding the U's to all the American articles. And then of course the writing quality and like, is this something that fits within the genre of a scholarly article, and how can we get there? And also, please don't send us 25,000 words. It's like an 8,000 word limit for research articles and 4,000 for sort of those thought ones. And then of course, peer reviewers, they're free to share some ideas. And so as you can see, it's this question and answer kind of a rubric that we do. The journal itself, we publish as soon as the paper's ready, it gets posted to our website and it's published. So we publish on an ongoing basis, and then we collect them all together into one issue. As I mentioned before, it's open access, and there's no article submission fees, processing fees, publication fees. No, you don't even have to be a member of BC TEAL. We do try and guilt you out though, and we do put a link to how to become a member. Just because, like I said, it's all volunteers doing this, and we don't charge any money, and we have a budget of $0. So once we started the journal going, I started to look at the other journals, and I started to think, what do they do that's really neat? And so some of the things that we started to do is we applied to be listed in the directory of open access journals. And that way, if your journal is accepted into the directory of open access journals, suddenly, boom, you could be in Texas and you do some Googling and our articles will come up in the library at your university or in the public library. We registered with UlixWeb as well, which is another sort of indexer that's important to help your journal be discoverable. And then what I'm most proud of, we were accepted by ERIC, the Educational Resources Information Center. That's when I felt, gosh, we're playing with the big boys now. If you go into ERIC, you can find our articles. Sometimes late at night when I'm depressed, I'll just go into ERIC and look at things that are listed and think, gosh, it's not so bad, the world, because our articles are in ERIC. So that was great. All these things take time, but I found all the people at those organizations were super friendly to naive Canadians who didn't know what they were doing. And so don't be afraid to reach out to those organizations and ask them questions. The other cool thing is that we're listed in Google Scholar. So if you Google BC TEAL or BC TEAL or BC TEAL Journal, like I do when I'm not Googling myself, Scott Roy Douglas, you'll find a lot of our articles. And what's neat, you can see how many times they've been cited. Like look at Tweedy, Bellinger, and Rezade, cited by 20 people. That's shocking. That's awesome. To do that, I had to submit my URL to Google Scholar. Again, when you go into Google Scholar, it's really easy to register your journal, and there's all kinds of information there. Oops. What else do we got? All right, so what do we publish? So I think those are some of the good questions. So we do research articles, but really we think of research writ large. We take our definition of research from the TESOL research agenda. And so I don't mean like you have to do like these studies where you have a control group and then you do an experiment, and like if the students make an English mistake, you shock them with electricity to see if that helps their English. No, you don't have to do that. It's just about spirited inquiry and systematic sort of investigation. We also publish shorter articles that are theoretical analyses, maybe what's going on in your classroom, opinion essays, but it's not just like, yeah, except for the shocking. It's not though, but you don't want to just send me an article that's restating theory. We want a new angle, right? So don't go into, just don't tell me what a bunch of other people think. Tell me what you think and what other people support your ideas, right? And so it's amazing. So what are some of the key findings in the journal? There's kind of 6 main areas of knowledge that have been published in the journal over the past 6 years. And so you can see we've got all kinds of articles that are on K-12 contexts. So for example, one really cool thing that one of the papers found was that if you have a strong instructional focus in elementary school classrooms where you teach printing and spelling by hand, it helps their English, and it made that connection between sort of writing and learning English. So that was some new knowledge that we published in the journal. There's lots of articles on English as an additional language for newcomers. So for new immigrants, for example, a really cool article that we have was looking at portfolio-based assessment and how it aligns with some of the key principles of adult education. And again, it's an article that might not have been published elsewhere, but this knowledge is now held at UBC or the BC TEAL Journal. We have articles that relate to English for academic purposes. A really interesting finding was that EAP students in this one particular study, they were really good at using the academic word list in terms of they knew those words, but they had trouble with collocations. And so this is something that they discovered. And now the recommendation is that collocations are something important to teach. And so it's kind of cool to find this evidence to support our practice. Post-secondary context, we have articles about that. One of my favorite articles It was on canine assisted therapy. And guess what they found? When our EAP students play with dogs, they learn English better. It's amazing, right? The dogs are kind of like a social lubricant that encourages interaction. And of course, we know interaction is one of the engines of language acquisition, right? But again, this is knowledge in British Columbia. We're doing this work in BC. Isn't that amazing? I'm shocked at us. Teacher education articles. One of our very first articles published by folks who aren't from British Columbia, but they were looking at some of rhetorical patterns for conference abstracts. And after reading that article, it gives you some really good ideas of how to submit a conference abstract. Again, knowledge that's important to capture. And then we have book reviews. And I might never have discovered the Lazy Teacher's Trainer's Handbook if it wasn't for our book reviews. I actually bought a copy, don't tell my students. And so there you go. That's some of the key findings that we have in the journal. But like I said, I think some of this knowledge might not have seen the light of day if there wasn't a regional journal, right? Because TESOL Quarterly can't publish everything, or TESOL Journal can't publish everything, or even in Canada, TESOL Canada Journal can't publish everything. I think there's a room for the regional journals to help this knowledge get out there into the world for free for everyone to read. And so what is the publication process? It's a handy 8-step process that we have, and you have to hit that big submission button. But basically, there's the submission first. It happens all through our website. Once we have handy submission preparation checklists in there, so you can check off. It says right there, do you make connections to British Columbia? And so how dare you submit? No, I'm just joking. But like you go through the checklist and you swear that you mentioned BC in there somewhere. There's author guidelines as well. We give you some tips and tricks about quirky publishing things here in Canada, et cetera, et cetera. And then it goes for editorial review once it comes into, once it's submitted. And so basically that's me as the editor, and I check to make sure that it fits with the scope and sequence. If it does, it's sent out for peer review. We've talked about peer review before. And again, the whole, we operate from a stance of appreciative peer review. And so we're looking at helping to strengthen your work for publication. And I read carefully, and if I feel there's language that might be brusque or misinterpreted, I'll work with the peer reviewers to think of nicer ways to say that. So for example, what? Haven't you ever heard of crashing? Why is that not in there? I might suggest to the peer reviewer, let's write this. This discussion of language acquisition could be strengthened if you refer to Crashin 1982. Yeah, and you see, it's the same information, but just in a nicer way. Yeah, and so it goes, we have the rubric and everything like that. But as I said before, no crashing. Oh, people are crashing bashing in the chat. But as I said, many hands make light work. There's people missing from this list that I'm showing you right now, but you can see just about everyone I've ever met in British Columbia has been asked to do a peer review, including folks from Ontario and et cetera, et cetera. Apologies if your name's not on here. I don't publish the names until the article has been published so that I can help maintain that anonymity. There's always revisions. Use track changes so that we can see how the paper develops. But the key is that you have to respond to the reviewer's comments, and often you can make a chart. So you put all the comments down one side and then you do your responses. Sometimes the feedback we give you might be 8 to 12 pages. And so you'll need to sort through that and create a chart and then think. But you can say to us, that comment is outside the scope of my paper, right? So don't feel like you have to stick everything in there that the peer reviewers say and will help. So for example, if someone said, oh yay, Krashen's a strong proponent of open access. But let's say someone said you must put Stephen Krashen in your paper and you don't think it fits, you're allowed to say not. You just have to have a rationale why you're not responding to the author's comment. This is also the point where we'll work with you for developmental editing. So that means that you'll be assigned someone, if you want, who will help you navigate through the peer review comments and strengthen your paper. Then it goes through copy editing. So all we've been doing is looking at big picture things. So for example, we have a copy editor, Jillian on Vancouver Island, and she volunteers and she'll go through and do the copy edits and things like that. Track changes, more revisions, could be some queries. This could take a month or more just to go through copy editing. Once it's copy edited, it comes back to me and I'll do the layout, which is my favorite part. I start to make the PDFs. And then I'll send the PDF back to you with galley proof written right across the side. And then it gets into the proofreading stage. You'll have another chance to read through your work and catch any typos. And then publication, boom. Once we're happy and it goes. So like I said, we publish it as soon as it's ready. And it's all licensed with a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 international license. So copyright stays with our authors. They also, each article has a DOI. So another reason someone asked, like, why would you get librarians involved? The scholarly librarian here at UBC helped me get DOIs for our journal articles. And the DOIs were free because UBC is paying for them for us. So that's why if you can find someone in your organization who works at a university, they could be involved. And these DOIs, again, it helps give us a level of legitimacy. It also creates a link to the articles that's steady there as well. It's really good. So there's the BC TEAL Journal. And I'm sure if a university off on the edge of Canada has server space for a journal, you folks in big cities that must have journal space as well at your universities, if you can find members who work at those universities. It's possible. There's also alternatives as well, such as WordPress and things like that you could use. But yeah, librarians are awesome. Remember I said it was a work of art? There it is, right? And I just love, I feel like they look like real journal articles. I know it's a real journal, but I still get a kick out of it, right? And this is the latest paper that was published by a couple of folks here in BC. They were looking at an online orientation to academic practices, but that's just what it looks like on the website. So that's the process. And so this brings us back then to like our original question, how do regional open access scholarly journals support the creation and dissemination of knowledge in the field of TESOL? If you had any new ideas, let's take 1 minute to just type them in the chat. So how could a TESOL affiliate journal help support local scholarship? And I'll just randomly read out some as they come. Someone said formatting is my favorite part. Me too. Yeah, exactly. Awesome. We're going to sit here until I get at least one idea. Thanks, Scott. It's not over yet. I got one more slide. All right, I'm going to move right to my next slide. So let's go back to the questions. And so I'm just going to do new share, go back here, boom. All right, does everybody see the Jamboard again? Let's see if people put stuff. There we go. Do you see the Jamboard, Jim? Yeah, you do. Awesome. All right. Let's see if I answered all of these questions. I've got about maybe, what, 2 minutes left? Something like that. Yeah. Awesome. So what is the biggest challenge in setting them up? I think the biggest challenge initially was finding the peer reviewers. I might have waxed poetic about how wonderful it is to be a peer reviewer, but people are busy, and when they see me coming, sometimes I've noticed people will turn around and walk away, and it's because I think there's some intimidation to being a peer reviewer. So it's very important to let folks know that we can all be peer reviewers, and peer review means you don't need to be called Dr. Fancy Pants, right? You can be anyone who's a member of the organization. How do you attract authors? Yeah, and so the way I attract authors is I go to every single BC TEAL event there is. I used to be famous pre-pandemic for my poster presentations. And so we would have regional conferences in BC, and I would have my poster. I would go to the big conference and talk about BC TEAL. Also, I visit schools and universities. And pretty much when people ask me, Scott, what do you do? I don't mention anything about my real life. I just say, hi, oh, what do I do? I'm a member of BC TEAL. Would you like to know about that? Oh, now it sounds like a cult. But anyway, that's how we get our, how do we recruit volunteers? Again, it's about me going to conferences, talking to everyone. We also in BC TEAL, we regularly put out calls for volunteers through our mailouts and through the newsletter. And everyone is welcome. What are your standards? I think we got that when I went through the peer review stuff. How do we encourage more K-12 teachers to engage in writing and publishing? That's a really good one. The way I've found the into that is the K-12 practitioners who are in our grad programs, especially MEd programs. And so I visit the MEd programs and I tell people about it. Also, it starts to become like a snowball. The more articles we have published from K-12 settings, the more we get. So you notice there was quite a list that were in K-12 settings. Can we post our published article? So you have, once an article is published in the BC TEAL Journal, you can do anything. You have copyright for your article, so you can do anything you want with it, but you have to give attribution to BC TEAL, and you can't change it around. And so, and you can't submit it to another journal. An article can only be published in one journal. But other than that, though, you're free to mail it to people, put it on your website, all of that kind of stuff. And then one last question, because we're all almost done. Rights of authors. I think I've covered a lot of these questions. Wow, I am amazing. So there we go. So that's me, Scott Douglas. Oops, I'm now, hold on. Let me just, new screen. Share. So so that's me, Scott Douglas, just scott.douglas@ubc.ca. Feel free to check out the BC TEAL Journal. You can just find it by Googling BC TEAL Journal. Those are just some of the references. And there again is my campus in British Columbia. And so there you go. I think I did it in time, Jim. There's 2 minutes left. So thank you very much, folks. I really appreciated you letting me come here today.
Well, thank you, Scott. It's always a pleasure. You know, the BC TEAL Journal is certainly a wonderful journal. You know, I always like reading it myself. And thank you, of course, for bringing this forward. It's always wonderful to hear about everything that's new and going on with the journal. So, and of course, open access. So I think this is really great. I see there's still lots of people thanking you there. So that's always wonderful too. Thank you very much for that. And,
you're welcome. I will stop my share. I'm just so proud of my campus, but there you go. So thank you very much, folks. I really appreciated that time, and I will now mute myself.
Hi, I have a question for you, Scott, if you can take advantage of this 1 minute. I put it on the chat, but if you can cover it now, it'd be great. It's related to this, you know, you're BC proud, and that's great, yes. And related to the idea, you know, the debate going on in the field about the local context versus and knowledge versus the universal knowledge. What's your stance in there? I mean, I understand you know the great benefits for the BC folks in there as a localized knowledge, but what about the others that could have commonalities or even differences that could learn from your journal, or why not be part of your journal as well?
That's wonderful. Yeah. And so that's a great question, because our journal is free and open access to anyone around the world. So anybody can read the articles and think about how they might connect to their own context. You'll find, though, a lot of the articles, you can't really generalize the findings, or they're not transferable because it's so different in other places. However, it is possible the findings will resonate with people in other areas, or spark ideas and things like that. And so that's good as well. And in terms of publishing in the BC TEAL Journal, yeah, it's created for BC TEAL members, but we have people who've published from the United States, Quebec, where else? Ontario, weird places like that. No, I'm just sorry, Ontario people. But
Yeah.
yeah, but rather I would say is if let BC TEAL help not your organization, but let's say someone in Manitoba wanted to start their own journal, we could help those Manitobans and maybe share our knowledge that way. And that's a little bit what you'll see what's been happening with TESOL affiliates already when I presented with Luby and Margie from Nice TESOL and KTESOL is that that affiliates who don't have a journal, let's get you started with a journal rather than having to publish in some weird Canadian journal, which is really we're just a regional little tiny journal, right?
Well, that's great. So you're basically playing the model, right? Or sharing a model. And I guess the AMPC here would play a great role and a big role in connecting affiliates together and sharing models like yours for, kind of mentoring others. So thank you. Great presentation.
I really enjoyed David's question here. How many affiliate journals are there? That is something actually we discussed earlier, Scott and I. And I don't think either of us are very sure of the answer. So I am really grateful that some people have posted the links in our chat. We'll try to put those together so that we can distribute them and sort of expand our knowledge base. Maybe Scott, I don't know if you have any more thoughts on that or not, but or any other affiliate journals that you know of.
Yeah, and so what I've done is I've gone to the TESOL website and I've looked at affiliates and I've actually clicked on every link hunting those journals. I'm playing around with an idea of, so I'm part of the Research Professional Council. We're playing around with the idea of looking at research trends in TESOL affiliate journals. And so hang on for a TESOL blog about that very topic. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, Scott.